scale at which we aggregate voters to select elected officials directly affects not only representation, but also policy outcomes. Specifically, it affects this trade-off that I talk about in the title, the trade-off between the supply of public goods and equity in how the costs of those goods are distributed. Now, what I mean by costs is referring to the fact that many of our public goods have spatially concentrated costs. The theory is that when you have these concentrated costs, the representation matters. And this is where we left off, that the example we're looking at is the shift from at-large to district elections. When this shift exists, in cities that shift to the smaller scale of representation, we see less supply, a decrease in the permitting of new housing, but more equity. The housing that is permitted is more evenly distributed across white and minority neighborhoods within the same city. But there was a less openly stated reason for preferring at-large elections, and that was that they would limit the representation of ethnic minorities. The theory goes that if you have a white voting majority, so 50% plus one, and those white voters vote exclusively for white city council candidates, what we call racially polarized voting, they can secure an all-white city council. So the question is, are district elections going to cause housing to be more equitably distributed? So this is the model that we started with. When you have concentrated costs, the spatial scale of representation matters. The evidence I presented is that in the example of at-large district elections within a city, we see less supply coming online because immediate increase in equity risks long-term affordability for these cities because housing is not coming online in a way that can meet growing demand. This is a big problem, and it extends beyond the city council offices. In achieving both equity in the costs and the supply of these public goods, I'm very much inspired by Eleanor Ostrom's work on common pool resource problems. And she had a saying that something that works in practice works in theory. In other words, maybe we can learn from existing institutions that seem to do a better job of balancing these two outcomes than what we've currently seen in the United States. But both these things are entwined, the costs themselves and the spatial scale of representation. And we need to look at both in unity if we're ever going to try to achieve both equity and supply when it comes to these things that society desperately needs, but few of us want them nearby.